All right, we're back. I'm tired of doing the podcast intros the same way. So, Penn State 365, you guys know the deal. Richie O'Leary, Dylan Callahan Crawley. We're back with another position preview ahead of spring ball. We did the quarterbacks, we did the running backs, we did the wide receivers, we did the tight ends, but we got one more position group for offense, and that's the offensive line group, and arguably the best position group on offense. Maybe not. Running backs is pretty up there, up for debate. But besides the point, offensive line, Penn State's offensive line has been very consistent over the past couple of years. Phil Troutwine has turned them from kind of a, I shouldn't say mediocre, but middle of the pack line to a very above average line now. It just seems like every time they lose a starter, they're able to replace them pretty easily, it seems like, for the most part. But Dylan, overall thoughts before we kind of go through the positions along this line, overall thoughts on this offensive line group heading into 2025?
Yeah, no, I think this is, like you said, Phil Troutwine, when he first took this over in 2020, Penn State's offensive line was pretty mediocre, middle of the pack, like you said. And then 2021 it was slightly better, but the last three seasons, it has really become a true strength of this program. And it was one of the best offensive lines in all of college football last year. You look at what they're returning this year. I think they have on this starting offensive line. I mean, I think all 5/6 because right tackle Anthony Donkoh coming back from a serious injury. We'll see how long he is out in terms of next season. I don't expect him to be obviously ready for spring. Could be wrong in that, but I'll have to double check. But don't expect him ready for spring based off what we saw happen at the end of last season. But between him and Rucci, I mean, I expect all 5-6 starters here to really eventually earn at least NFL training camp invites, if not, be drafted by the time their careers at Penn State wrap up. This is a really talented offensive line and offensive line room that Phil Troutwine has assembled in Happy Valley, and it's going to be a really big part of this team's offense in 2025, a major strength for this program. You could argue running backs is the strongest of the position groups, and that is because the top two are pretty damn good. But I mean, across the board, this is, I think, might be the best starting unit for Penn State outside of the running backs.
Yeah, I was kind of going through Twitter the other day, and there's a lot of hype ahead of this 2025 season for this line. Now, I don't think they win the Joe Moore Award because that's like you have to be like extremely dominant. I think Army won it last year, and Michigan was the year before that.
Michigan won 2 years in a row before that, and
yeah,
it may have been Army this past. Yeah, it was Army past year.
Which I get it. They honestly run the ball a ton, and as long as you can protect that quarterback, and they were top 25 for a little bit.
Army, Washington, and then Michigan twice.
Okay. Oh, Washington really got it. Okay. So technically now a Big Ten program, Washington, but it seems like the Big Ten's been pretty dominant when it comes up front, and that's not too surprising. Is there any shot in hell though this group can win that? I feel like I'm reaching a little bit, but
yeah, there's a shot. It's just, I don't know what the Joe Moore Award committee is really looking for, in terms of stats or play, beyond just being a dominant, physical, outstanding offensive line. Penn State could absolutely be that this year. I think they have the pieces to be that type of offensive line, but there's 135 other FBS programs out there, so a ton of competition, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, they have the potential for sure.
Totally fair. So let's go group by group, left to right on this line. Left tackle, Drew Shelton's back again. His backup, I'm just kind of projecting it to be Egan Boyer. It could be someone else. It could be technically a Rucci or Donkoh, depending on who wins that job.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Shelton first. Drew Shelton, he was a little inconsistent at times last year, but I thought he put it together well towards the end of the season.
Yeah, Shelton's an intriguing player just because, you watch it, it never feels great, but until the playoffs, I don't think he allowed a sack in his career. And he allowed 4 sacks in 2 games, but Part of that, he was. I mean, he hasn't allowed sacks, and when you get that, you'll take that production out of your left tackle every time. Yeah, he's not a perfect left tackle. He has a bit of a development to go in his game. I think he's going to get a shot in the NFL, but you absolutely take that level of experience. I mean, this is a true senior. He has been a starter for this will be his third year starting now. I mean, he has a lot of valuable experience, and for the most part, he's gotten the results that you want to see out of your left tackle. So it may not always be the prettiest, when he's out there, and he's never going to be one that in the PFFs of the world grades out, uh, really highly. But he gets the job done, and at the end of the day, this is a results business, and he gets results.
That's true. Going to his backup now. This is where it gets a little intriguing. I know, like I said, I have Egan Boyer listed technically. Do you think that's correct, or do you think it would more so be someone from that right side of the line that would probably just shift over?
No, I think they're likely going to keep the right side of the line, the way it is, especially because Donkoh is probably going to miss some time. But and Boyer was a guy that really, as a true freshman last year, impressed the coaching staff. And once he arrived on campus, he was really impressive to the coaching staff, and as somebody they have a lot of, they've built a lot of hype around in terms of his potential and his future with the program. So I think him being penciled in right now as that second string left tackle is probably correct as of right now. But yeah, I won't close the door on a Rucci or a Donkoh moving to the left side, but go from the right side to the left side, especially with that being the blind side for Drew is would be a notable change for a tackle to make.
Yeah, for sure. Left guard, Vega Ione back. We've seen him do it all this year.
Yeah.
He's just been used in almost every single way. Some of his blocks this past season are just super impressive. And mind you, this is a former 3-star kid that they got out of Washington. When they took him, I was a little hesitant because I'm like, you never really go to the West Coast. But again, Phil Troutwine was able to identify a gem.
Well, also give credit to Stacey Collins on this one.
That's true.
Because they started really recruiting him heavily after Stacey Collins came to Penn State from Boise State a couple years ago. And Stacey had a previous relationship, I believe, with Vega. And Vega came and, has been a really nice piece of this offensive line now for a few seasons. I'm sorry about this lighting. I tried to improve it, but yeah, Vega's a hell of a talent. He played pretty well last year. Didn't allow a sack in the regular season. Did he allow one in the postseason? Didn't allow one in the postseason either. Just allowed about a pressure per game last year. Just an impressive guy, and he's such a versatile player because he can play left guard where he does play a majority of his game time, or plays majority of the time on the field. But also he can take snaps at center and he can take snaps at right guard as well. I mean, this is a guy that if Nick Dawkins left, people were discussing could he move to center for Penn State. And he absolutely could have, but he is staying a left guard this season. And he is, just a force to be reckoned with, an amazing athlete. He is going to, I think, have a chance to be a pretty high draft pick once he enters the NFL draft process, just because that athleticism to go with his size and his tenacity. I mean, that's what NFL offensive line coaches drool over. I think of, as an Eagles fan, I think of guys, obviously smaller guys, which makes him even more impressive. But you think of how much success guys like Jason Kelsey and now Cam Jurgens have had for the Eagles. Cam Jurgens spent the first few years of his time as a guard, now at center. Landon Dickerson of the Eagles, very similar in terms of size and athleticism as well. I think he has a bright future ahead of him because of that combination.
Yeah, I mean, size is there. He's a hell of a blocker. Even like used him in this like a wide receiver's like slot position to block, where it's
Yeah.
like
I
they
mean,
just you go ahead. He's just
no,
in
the dude,
motion, like
yeah,
an
the
offensive
dude,
lineman in motion.
yeah, the dude's 6'4", 350, and look how well he's moving out there. I mean, uh, he is just a special talent, and
Mhm.
he probably won't get as drafted as high as he should, in my opinion. But I think he's got, like I said, a really bright future, and just such a fun player to
Mhm.
watch. Which I feel like you rarely say about offensive linemen. It's kind of a go through the motions type position,
Yeah.
but man, he makes it fun to watch.
And behind him, JB Nelson, veteran, been with the team for a couple years now after
Yeah,
JUCO. I'm a little shocked he stayed, to be honest with you, because I feel like he could be a starter somewhere.
he probably could, but like at a bunch of positions, Penn State, he rotates their offensive linemen quite a bit, especially those that they trust. And he's one of those guys that they have some pretty high trust in. You look at what he did last year. Of course, now I'm having struggle finding his name on the snap count. Here it is: 16 games played, 228 snaps, allowed 5 pressures in those 228 snaps, including 94 pass blocking snaps. I mean, another guy who's versatile. He can play left tackle, right tackle, or guard, and I mean that versatility just goes a long way.
Yeah, having a guy like him is going to be super helpful this year. Just God forbid something does happen, because these guys do get beat up. They're in the trenches,
Yeah,
so
no,
it's
yeah.
every single play. It's
You're
helmet to
you're
helmet,
never
basically.
healthy as an offensive lineman. You're never healthy.
Center Nick Dawkins returns. Not too shocked about that one, considering he was pretty solid last season. Could he sneak into an NFL camp? I think he could, for sure.
Yeah,
But he's very consistent.
yeah. Another one of those guys that you just look at it. He gets results. Only allowed 2 sacks last year. He's not, he's not an elite pass blocker. He's not an elite run blocker, but he gets results. He's
Mhm.
a huge part of the leadership of this team. He's a huge part of the chemistry aspect of this team. He's kind of the glue that being the center. It's not to be um, on the nose here, but he's the glue that keeps it together. I think,
Mhm.
or one of the glue pieces that keeps the offense together. And Penn State's going to miss him once he's gone. I think from a leadership aspect and from that glue aspect. But yeah, it just kind of like Drew Sheldon. He gets the results. Uh, Obviously, you'd like him not to give up 29 pressures in 16 games next season.
Mhm.
Um, but at the end of the day, Drew only got hit 3 times because of him. He only got sacked twice. He gets results. He does a decent enough job there.
Mhm.
He doesn't need to be an elite run blocker for Penn State to be, or sorry, an elite blocker in general for Penn State to be successful. If he
Mhm.
does what he did last year, and even takes a little bit of a step forward, it'll go a long way for Penn State's success this year.
Yeah. Now, for me, backing him up, I have TJ Shanahan Jr., the incoming transfer from Texas A&M. Mind you, TJ Shanahan played some left guard and right guard and center for Texas A&M
Yeah.
last year. I think he's best projected at center, and he's got multiple years, so it makes sense to have him just sit behind Dawkins and kind of just do a learning year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see a whole ton of TJ Shanahan this year. I think did he redshirt last year?
No, he played in like
He,
7 games,
yeah,
8 games, 3, 4,
um,
5, 6, 9 games. Never mind. Hold on. Started
yeah,
2.
yeah. I don't think we're going to see a ton of Shanahan this year. I think, like you said, it's kind of a learning year for him, development year for him. We'll see him a little bit, but I don't think there's a big. Sorry, that was his second season at A&M, so he's a redshirt
Mhm.
sophomore this year.
Yeah.
So redshirt doesn't really matter anyway. But yeah, I think it's going to be developmental year for Shanahan. But again, you mentioned where he can play. Versatility is big for Penn State.
Mhm.
He could definitely develop into a starting center for Penn State long term, or he could kind of take on that JB Nelson role, who could play guard, center, or Vega Ione role, who could play guard, tackle, center.
Mhm.
6'4", 330. He has good size. Maybe a little undersized, obviously, for a tackle, but he could play any of those 3 interior positions for Penn State going forward. That's a huge, boost to your depth in the interior of the offensive line there. and that can go a long way. So I think
Mm-hmm.
you look at
Mm-hmm.
the offensive line just in general, and we mentioned all three at this point, but between the starting five and then you add JB Nelson, TJ Shanahan, and then once he's healthy, Donkoh or Rucci, whichever one you want to pencil in as a starter.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to the opposite. You got three backup offensive linemen that I think you realistically trust. Obviously, Shanahan still has to earn that trust with this staff, but I think you have three guys there that you know you can somewhat trust. Two that you could definitely trust, and Shanahan could earn that trust. That if you have eight guys you can work with, that's big for any program,
Yeah.
but especially for Penn State, that depth will be nice. And then you really just only have to worry about Jevin Williams and Egan Boyer or any of the other younger offensive linemen trying to earn their mark.
Yeah. Moving on to right
Make their mark.
guard. Right guard, they're losing. It's the only guy they actually lose as a starter along the line in Sal Wormley. He's probably going to be an undrafted free agent, maybe a late round pick. It's pretty close there, it seems like, per the mocks. But
Yeah.
either way, I have Cooper Cousins replacing him.
Yeah.
You think that's like
Yeah.
like 100%
Lock,
going to happen?
lock.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Cooper started this season.
Yeah.
He's too damn good. He played too much last year, I think, not to start this season. It would be a disappointment if he didn't start this season. Has all the makings of potential, high level guard who can be a high draft pick in a couple years. I think there will be maybe a little bit of a learning curve going from being a rotational guy to being a locked in starter, but this is a guy who played a lot of time at guard last year, 100 snaps at right guard, 39 at left guard, and then 15 at center. I think he's going to have I think he's going to start this season, no doubt in my mind.
Okay.
Yeah, if anything happens though to Nick Dawkins, he could also easily move over to center as well and play there if they are not comfortable enough with Shanahan, or Shanahan can move to guard. Cousins moves into center. There's a lot of things you can do, and that goes back to having 7-8 guys that you can trust to play goes a long way.
Jevin Williams, you just mentioned recently. I have him backing him up. I know he started out at tackle, but now he's playing guard. How is he kind of developing? And do you think he's the backup right guard right now?
I think so. He started his career at tackle. He started his career, as a tackle. He's done a little bit of guard. Last season, he did play most of his games at tackle. 71 snaps at left tackle, 19 snaps at left guard. But I think him playing inside is potentially his best avenue to playing time next year. This is a guy who was a pretty high ranked prospect coming out of Wild Missing area. Some places even had him a 5-star prospect, which I thought was a little bit high, just because I think if you're going to rank a guy as a 5-star prospect, they should be somebody who can make an impact early on.
100%.
I never saw Williams being an early impact type guy. Now, could he develop into a first round talent in the next couple of years? Sure, but he's had a small role these first 2 seasons, and that's perfectly fine. It's going to take people time to develop. So I think I wonder what the general Penn State fan thought is on him, just in general, because he was a guy who was highly touted and hasn't really seen a bunch of playing time. More playing time than Alex Birchmeyer, who was also highly talented. That's he's a guy in a make or break situation this offseason in Birch. But Williams, going back to him, I think left guard wouldn't put that one in stone, but I think that's probably his best avenue to playing time this year. Concerned Egan Boyer's emergence at tackle last year, and then you got really 2 good right tackles.
It's true. Let's just switch to right tackle. Nice little segue. You had multiple guys starting there between Donkoh and Rucci. If Donkoh is healthy, it's going to be a pretty interesting battle. Who do you think ends up winning that? Because Rucci was like dominant as hell in the playoffs.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, I had to send a text. Yeah, no. Rucci, wow. One of the biggest surprises, I think, last year, and again, apologize for this line, and it's terrible.
You're good.
In the playoffs, just I remember when Donkoh went down, I was like, shit, I don't know what Penn State's gonna do because Rucci just hasn't looked good the first 3 months of the season. I mean, he had like
It's totally fair.
a couple solid games, but it was when he was on the field, it was a struggle. I mean, and even that Minnesota game, he struggled. He had 4 pressures allowed in that Minnesota game, and then something clicked in that Maryland game, or between that Minnesota Maryland game, and he allowed 2 pressures the rest of the way against elite talent in Oregon, Boise State, and Notre Dame. Just what a narrative turnaround for him. And what great it's just such a great story too, because a former really highly touted prospect goes to Wisconsin, barely sees the field, comes back to Pennsylvania, goes to Penn State, starts at not starts at Penn State, but starts at Penn State as a backup. Not a bunch of high expectations when he's on the field. It's mixed results, leaning towards bad results at times. But then when Penn State needed him the most, he stepped up, and instead of being a liability, he was a huge strength of the offense in the Big Ten championship game and the playoffs. I mean, he's gonna if he picks up where he left off, he's gonna make it really hard, I think, for Anthony Donkoh to reclaim that starting spot this year. And maybe that's not a bad thing. Donkoh, suffered a pretty significant injury in late November. We're talking probably 9-10 months at least to recover from that type of injury, and it's going to take him a while after that to get back to 100%, right? So I think maybe it's not the worst thing for Donka to have a little bit of a season where he can take a step back, get fully healthy, continue his development, play a little bit as the season more and more as the season progresses. But if Richie picks up right where he left off and starts the season hot next year, I'm not sure you can replace that if he continues to play at that high of a level. Now, it's a big if. We're talking 6 months away from the season even beginning, but it's going to create a really interesting scenario at right tackle, in my opinion, once the season does begin.
You think Wisconsin's kind of kicking himself a little bit for letting a very solid tackle go now at this point? Or you think that their air raid style that they're trying to implement didn't work, and now they're trying to go back to their old school ways?
I mean, I think coaches will always kick themselves a little bit if a player leaves and has success elsewhere. But at the same time, the dude was there for 3 years under
it was Longo. I think he got screwed a little bit because they were trying to run that crazy air raid. And
was last year Fickle's second year in Wisconsin?
It's either second or third. He might have been there all 3 for him. He started in 2023, 24. Yeah, so that was only second year.
So I mean, 2 different coaching staffs never really saw the field. It was just not going to happen at Wisconsin for Rucci. I mean, the big thing was that he couldn't gain weight at Wisconsin. He comes to Penn State and gains like 20 pounds in the first 6 months on campus. At the end of the day, just that clearly shows that Wisconsin just was doing something wrong. Or, Losi is one of the best in strength and conditioning coaches in the country. But still, I mean, how does a guy not gain weight for 3 years, comes to another school and puts it on like that? I mean, it just wasn't going to happen in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Hey, Wisconsin lost, Penn State's gained. We'll see if he can continue that high level of play. Because if he can, I mean, he will earn NFL draft consideration if he continues to play at that level.
That's true. Yeah, 100%. Go on.
One last thing. Rucci, another one of those guys like Williams, and this is where the philosophy of what a 5-star talent should be. Rucci, I'm not sure what we had Rucci as off the top of my head. I think
he was pretty high 4-star. Yeah.
Other places had him as a 5-star. But Rucci's one of those talents where
Oh, we had him 5-star.
We had him
18
5-star.
overall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, it's what do you think a 5-star is? I think a 5-star is potentially somebody who could come in right away, make an impact. It doesn't have to be a major impact, but make an impact early in their career. Others see a 5-star as, this guy has a chance of being a first round pick or whatever. Everybody's definition of a 5-star talent is probably different.
See, this is where I kind of agree but disagree to an extent. I think a 5-star for offensive line and defensive line is a little different than a 5-star at a skill position. 5-star skill position guys should be out there day one, 100%. Like Jeremiah Smith, Travis Hunter, Ryan Williams.
True 5-star talents.
Skill position guys.
Yeah.
Offensive line, I give them at least a year, if not 2, before I need to see something.
Yeah, and offensive line is always tough. But I think with Rucci, and I think with Williams potentially too, Rucci was always, his best football was always going to come in like year 4, and if he had a 5th year 5, he was always going to be a slow burn type development. And I think we're seeing that. We saw that at the end of last season, and we'll see if that trend continues into this fall.
I always say I'm going to go with year 2 for 5 stars, to be honest with you, just for offensive linemen. Just because for the most offensive linemen, I project to see them on the field by year 3. You get them a red shirt, you get them some experience, and then that 3rd year, you should be seeing something out of them.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, look, for example, last year, Jordan Seaton, I don't even know what he was, like top 5, top 10 in the country. Went to Colorado, mind you. You're only as good as your offensive line as a whole, too, but started immediately at left tackle. Saw some serious struggles early on, but put it together a little bit late. Still not great, but average as a
And if
true
you're Colorado
freshman.
last year, you can take that chance of him struggling early on
because he's better than what you have.
Because he's better than what you have, but and now Colorado obviously had a really good season, but if he struggled, it wasn't the end of the world for them. Because it was still probably better what they put out than the year before. But yeah, you look at it, he had 9 pressures allowed against Nebraska in that one game, and then
it got better.
It got better, but and it's also all for offensive linemen and any position, of course. But offensive linemen especially, it depends what you have in front of you.
Right. Very true. Before we wrap this one up, I do have a couple quick ones for you, and this has nothing to do with anyone we've mentioned. I guess we mentioned them technically, but I want to talk about they just brought in 4 freshmen. Again, I don't see these guys seeing the field early. Maybe one of them, maybe Goodman, I think has a chance, maybe. But we've seen guys like Birchmeier be highly ranked. We've seen Chimdiono was kind of highly ranked by some sites. Javen Williams, we mentioned already. Do these guys, is it kind of, I know you said Jevin Williams was already like make or break, but would you say this is make or break for Birch, Williams, Chimdiono, even like some of the second year guys, like in the Donovan Harbor and Sexton? Like we haven't really heard a ton about these
guys. Sexton, no, because
it's year 2, so
you got to remember with Sexton as well. This is a kid who played quarterback just a couple years ago.
True.
He is still raw as a tackle, and he's still put on weight. He's been put on weight really well. Chimdiono, I don't think so. I always saw him as a death piece, potential starter later in his career. Birchmeier, absolutely. Kind of make or break, I think, spring for him. You haven't really heard much about him at all over his time. And I wonder, because he was a wrestler in high school. So he came in underweight a little bit compared to where you'd probably expect, a guy to come in, do a Power 5 program, Power 4 program. But you haven't heard much about him. JB Nelson is gone after this season, of course. Ione could be gone after this season. So it could be an avenue to playing time in 2026, but I don't see him necessarily breaking, getting into that too deep this season. So, that's more of, I think Penn State will be willing to keep him around, but does he want to stay around, or does he want to try to go somewhere where he could potentially get more playing time?
True.
But I think it's a big make or break, hard to say, but I think it's a really big offseason for him. Donovan Harbor, had to cut some bad weight, which he has been able to do.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the second year guys, in a tough situation. I think the big one is Birchmeyer, and then to a very much lesser extent, I think big offseason for Williams, but it's not a make or break. The only guy I really have my eye on in terms of their future here is Alex Birchmeyer.
You think there's a chance he leaves in the spring if he doesn't make a too deep, so to speak? Because they do have to cut a lot of ships still. They're at 133 right now, and they have to get down to 105 according to these new rules that are expected to be passed.
We'll see if I wouldn't be shocked if I'm surprised they're not doing this, but I wouldn't be shocked if there is a change in which instead of being at 105 for this year, it gets down to
105 next year or something.
115 this year, 105 next year. Because if every program has to get to 105, you're talking about thousands of kids being cut, and there's just not enough room, which isn't a huge change from the portal in general, but still. He's the only guy in the offensive line room that I really have my eye on in terms of the portal. I was surprised he didn't enter the portal, honestly, in the first window. So that's why I think this spring practice is going to be really big for him and decide his future with this program.
Yeah, so sounds like a pretty promising year, though, for the Penn State offensive line room. I'm going to go out on a limb and say they finished top. I know the rankings are skewed because everyone has their own version of it. I'm going to say they're going to finish as a top 10 offensive line in the country.
Yeah, I think their top 10 offensive line in the country should be should be a big strength of this room, and should help the running backs have some big years and keep Drew off the ground will be huge as well. And I expect big things out of this unit. I mean, the only unit with questions on offense is wide receiver.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so that's it for the offensive position previews. Check out the other ones on our YouTube channel below, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. All three and everything else, actually. I think we're on Google and all that other stuff too. But defense is coming up next. We're going to start with the defensive line sooner rather than later. That will come out probably tomorrow, maybe the next day. We'll figure that one out. But stay tuned on your YouTube feed, podcast feed. And for me and Dylan, that's another episode of the Penn State 365 podcast. Signing off.